Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the movie Wonder Woman. And I overall think they did a really good job with this movie. They did a really good job of introducing Wonder Woman and Diana and kind of showing how she ticks and what's important to her and why she's kind of like this badass and this kind of like beacon of hope. Kind of like what Superman and Batman needed to be in their kind of previous outings, where they're kind of twisted into a little bit kind of weird, gritty for the sake of being gritty. Because a really good thing that Wonder Woman kind of took from Captain America is kind of taking this optimistic and hopeful person and putting them into a darker situation to kind of challenge that kind of belief, and either them having to readjust to a certain thing or reaffirming their belief and still fighting in a way that seems fit to them. And that's kind of a cool thing that I'd like seeing in this movie. Now, granted, there's some other similarities to Captain America that start popping up throughout the movie that's like, okay, it's like, alright, you could have went a different direction with here, but it overall doesn't completely derail it or anything. It's a nice contained package that does a nice job of setting up who Wonder Woman is, where she comes from, and still kind of tying it together with what we've seen from her from like Batman vs. Superman to kind of get her in the present day. So the film starts out and we see her kind of like monologuing and talking about the darkness that she's seen in humanity and in mankind, and having not really done much superheroics for a while. So she's like in the Louvre and in this like being like a curator and all that, which is pretty cool because I like history. And it's like, yay! Someone's undercover part is to be a historian and document historical things. That's always a kind of cool thing. So we see that this like Wayne Enterprises security van pulls up and has this package for her and gives it to her, and it's Bruce Wayne giving her the original photograph from World War One. And then we go into kind of her reminiscing. And I think it's a very effective plot device to do this way. Because otherwise you're going to be like, how are we doing this like origin story? It just nicely bookends. We start in the present day and we end in the present day. And in between, for the whole movie, we get to kind of see where she comes from. So while she's reminiscing and kind of like telling us kind of her story, we see that she is from the island of Themyscira, and that she's an Amazonian, and that it goes into like the whole Greek mythology portion of like backstory of the Amazonians. And this is an important thing because I kind of had a theory that they could go to it. They could have went this way and followed the kind of Thor model and like putting it in the actual mythology of Greek mythology, which I'm glad that they did. Or there was certain allusions in like the Man of Steel movie that a Kryptonian had survived, and I was wondering if they were going to base that, since the Kryptonian ship kind of crashed enough timeline-wise, that possibly the Amazonians were like a race of half-human, half-Kryptonian women. I'm glad that they went more with the Greek mythology because I like it when they expand the superheroics to just like outside crazy stuff, and it was cool to see them like talking into that and showing that the gods of Olympus made man, and that they started going to war because of Ares like influenced them and making them like crazy, and that the Amazonians, or women in general, I think it wasn't really clear, but it was made that the Amazonians were made to kind of like bring love and everything and kind of counteract Ares making them more bloodthirsty and everything. And that worked for a while, until Ares got pissed off and decided to kill off all the Olympian gods. Now granted, I was like, holy crap, that's a pretty big thing to take out a whole pantheon. But I think it works into the effect that in the larger DC universe in the comic books, we've got like other kind of gods out there, so it kind of still, we can still see other gods and everything within this realm. So we get this titanic clash, and we have Zeus and Ares are the last ones, and Zeus is mortally wounded, and Zeus also mortally wounds Ares. Now Ares is still alive on Earth, but he is kind of like in the background at the moment. Zeus, on the other hand, gifts the Amazonians a god-killing weapon. And that's kind of where we see Diana come into the picture. And we see her as a little girl, kind of like escaping from her tutors and stuff and wanting to be a warrior and everything and want to fight and all that. And of course, her mother wants her to be safe and everything and wants to keep her from doing that. But of course, Diana's aunt starts training her and everything, and she had also showed Diana what Diana thought was the god-killing weapon of the sword, and showing her all this kind of stuff, and telling her, of course, the story of how she was born. And we learned some tidbits that she is the only child on the island, and that supposedly Zeus made her, like, she was sculpted from clay, and Zeus gave her life. It's like, that's pretty cool. And it's just like, what's going on within the Amazonian society if Diana is the only little child? It's like, okay, I'm just hoping that they do expand upon that later on, because that either means that the Amazonian women don't have a way to reproduce, or that the gods creating people from clay was their main source of like replenishing ranks and all that. That's just a pretty interesting kind of cultural thing that I hope they expound upon in her later films, possibly. So, of course, we see her doing all this trans stuff, and we see her, of course, growing to her kick-ass woman self, and just getting through. Of course, the mother keeps getting pissed off that she's being trained by the aunt, but then tells her to be trained 5 times harder, 10 times harder, and we see her going through, and it's like she's got really rough training. And then seeing the aunt just like hounding on her, and then she uses the bracelets, and this like shockwave throws out, and she accidentally hurts her aunt, and everybody's just kind of like freaked out for what's going on. It's like, okay. And you can see telegraphed that we probably don't, this sword is probably not the god killer weapon, and something has to be dealt with Diana being linked to it. So, of course, she's like off on her own trying to contemplate what's going on, and then we see this plane come towards the island and crash in the water. And this is Chris Pine's character, Steve Trevor. And he's like, well, I'm pretty much sinking, so this kind of sucks. And of course, Diana comes in and saves him. And it's kind of funny being like, you're a man, I've never seen one before. And he's like, yeah, I'm a man, don't I look like one? And then, of course, he had like come through this kind of barrier because the gods had made it so that it was protected. And then we see these Germans come in like, whoa, holy crap. So we get this pretty cool kind of fight sequence because the Germans are coming up on the beach, the Amazonians come to do their fighting, and it's pretty cool and interesting because the Amazonians are very effective fighters, but they are fighting with swords and shields and bows and arrows, where the Germans are fighting with like World War I era weaponry of like rifles and all that. And it kind of gets messy seeing them kind of like going down. And I did like this scene, but there's points in this movie where the CGI kind of like takes you out a little bit, and that's seeing them doing like the cool maneuvers on the horses, but it's like, that looks really weird, and I just wish that the CGI was a little bit better done in certain sequences with the horses. So, of course, they get and take out the rest of the Germans. Steve, of course, helps Diana, and of course, Diana's aunt is killed because she was protecting Diana as well. And they're like, bring him, we have to figure out what's going on. He's like, I'm not at liberty to say all the stuff that I need to. And of course, they bring out the lasso of truth and all that on him, which is pretty cool. And seeing him like forced to tell everything, that he is a American spy working with British intelligence, that he went undercover and was kind of like going to see what's going on with like General Ludendorff, who's like pretty much essentially the Red Skull in World War One, kind of like fighting the Allies in Germany. He's kind of like on his last legs. He's working with Dr. Poison to create more effective gases that can pretty much get through gas masks and everything. So Steve's like, oh, I see that. Take a look, ran away, and that's pretty much how he got there. He's like, I gotta get this stuff to my people. And they're contemplating if they should let him go, if he could bring them back to the island and all that, and just pretty much trying to figure out what's going on. And of course, the Amazonians are charged with taking down Ares. And Diana sees this whole giant great war that's going on as Ares meddling with man and that they need to go and stop this. And of course, her mother's like, no, you're not doing it. Nobody's doing it. We're not sending any Amazonians. Screw that. So of course, she's like trying to figure out what's going on and talking to Steve to figure out kind of more about him and more about this war that's going on. And it was kind of funny seeing like Steve doing his stuff in like the bath, and then she comes in and is like, yeah, okay, and he's trying to explain the concept of time to her because she was like, what's that? It's like, oh, it's a watch, and it's like, it tells you how to live your life? That's kind of weird. And she's like trying to like understand what's going on in his world and all that, and finally makes the decision to go herself to stop Ares. So we see her getting ready to like go in, take this shield, take the sword, take the lasso of truth, and like the armor and everything that's in there. And we also see this little tidbit, of course, bringing more into the whole Zeus thing. We see a bull, which is a sacred animal of Zeus. Now, granted, it was kind of dark and it was kind of hard to see, but as she's like trying to get into the tower, we even see that she's kind of stronger than most Amazonians because she started making her own handholds into solid rock. So, of course, her and Steve pretty much go on their boat. Her mother says goodbye to her and says that she can never return. And that's a pretty big thing to say. So, they kind of go off and they get to London and everything. And Diana's not impressed. She's like, dirty and ugly. And he's like, yep. And, of course, she wants to get to the front lines to confront Ares and all that. And he's like, no, I got to get this to Parliament and everything. And, of course, they get there. People are being like confused about her being in places that women normally wouldn't be in that time period. And it was also kind of funny seeing her get more period focused attire in World War I era and all that, because she's like, how can you fight in this stuff? And of course, I love Steve's secretary being like, yeah, she's pretty cool. And then they leave the sword and the shield with her as we start seeing them like go off to British intelligence to figure out what's going on. And of course, she starts getting the idea of kind of what's going on because German spies tried to take out Steve, and she's using her cuffs and everything to like deflect bullets, which was pretty badass. And they were going to try and figure out where Ares was, but of course the dude took a cyanide pill. So they get into the intelligence briefing, and they're kind of like freaked out that a woman's there, which gives Sir Patrick the kind of like thing he needs to get the armistice kind of stuff going on. And of course, you can see it telegraphed that there's more to this dude than meets the eye. And of course, they have the notes. He shows it to the one important military commander. He's like, oh, okay. And they're like, we can't decode this. And of course, Diana can speak all these languages and is able to get through it and figure out kind of what's going on, what's the gas, and what they're trying to do. So the military commanders are like, no, we're not doing it. We're not letting you go there. Whatever. Okay. And of course, Diana's pissed off. I'm like, we need to go and stop this stuff. And Steve's like, listen, I lied to them. We're going to do this. And she's like, if you can lie to them, are you lying to me? And then he takes the last one. He's like, we're going to do this. We're probably going to die. I'm scared. And it was just funny seeing him do that and have that trust in her and in the lasso to be like, I know what I'm doing. So he goes and gathers his crew together, and they go off to get to the front line. And seeing her see all the kind of crap that's been going on with the war is pretty cool, because she starts off really hopeful. And granted, she kind of loses a little bit of that throughout the movie with all the events that go on, but it's kind of cool to see her still have that hopefulness and be that kind of symbol of hope for people, because they are able to get to the front and all these people are like scared, they've lost loved ones, and of course Steve's more focused on the mission and she wants to help these people and like charges over no man's land, which granted was awesome and cool, but you kind of have to temper that with more of a plan, because she just goes out and it's like, you haven't dealt with like machine guns and everything. Now granted, she was able to deal with them, and Steve was like, okay, we've got an opening, this is a faster route than trying to get around the lines. So they're able to get through and do pretty kick-ass action scenes as they're able to retake the town of Veld for the people and have a pretty cool victory, because in World War I, trench warfare was dirty nasty warfare. If you were able to take as much ground as they did to actually retake a city, more of a village, it was like a monumental achievement. And seeing the way that they were doing it was awesome because Diana was doing her kick-assness, and of course Steve and his other people supporting her were doing their own stuff, like making sure that she didn't get hit from other places and taking out other people. It was cool teamwork to see. And of course seeing them kind of celebrate afterwards, see the picture taken, and seeing Diana and Steve kind of like take the next level and all that and actually be together. Now granted, we don't see much, but it's pretty heavily implied. It's like, okay, that's cool. And it doesn't seem forced, like, oh, she needs a love interest. It works organically. There's chemistry between Diana and Steve, and between Gal and Chris Pine. And it's like, okay, cool. So we're getting some stakes and everything more involved. While this is going on, we see that, of course, the armistice was about to go through, but Ludendorff pretty much effectively kills whole German high command to keep the war going, and is still working with Dr. Poison, and they're just kind of figuring out what to do. Of course, they get information about a gala, and they're like, okay, let's go there to Ludendorff and figure out what's going on and get to the gas. And of course, Diana is convinced that Ludendorff is Ares, and you can't shake that from her no matter what. While Steve's mission is, yeah, it'd be good to kill Ludendorff and Ares. He doesn't completely agree with the Ares part yet. But he's like, if we stop this gas, we can force Germany to end the war and all that, and we'll be good. And it's just interesting to see that kind of like conflict between them, because it's not really someone being right and someone being wrong. It's two people that have two separate ideas that you could talk about, but they just didn't do it in time for the repercussions to be like done away with. So of course they go to the gala. Diana tried to take down Ludendorff, but of course Steve stops her, and he had been trying to pretty much do his spy tactic to get Dr. Poison to tell him where the stuff was, but of course Diana came in and diverted his attention. It was like, crap. And of course they did a demonstration of the gas on Veld, and of course Diana is blaming Steve for it when, granted, they were probably preparing for this gas to be deployed at any moment, and no matter whose plan had worked out first, the village was probably going to be destroyed. So of course they're kind of pissed off. Diana goes after Ludendorff and is able to fight him, and of course Ludendorff has this kind of like gas that Dr. Poison was able to give him that like makes him pretty much amped up. So Diana is able to do this cool fight with him and kills him, but of course the war doesn't stop. She's like, what's going on? And we find out that Sir Patrick, the guy that was in London and kind of bankrolling this whole operation, is actually Ares. And it's like, yeah, usually how this works is they usually work behind the scenes, and the person you think is Ares usually isn't. So of course they're doing their own fight because Diana loses a sword, and of course Ares tells her of her lineage. Now, what's going to be interesting is to see how they really go with her lineage, because there's a definitive difference between if she's a goddess or a demigod. Because her mother said that the story that she said of her being made from clay could just be a story, and Zeus and her could have done it and have Diana be a demigod. But yet usually it's been implied heavily throughout this movie that only gods can kill other gods. So I would tend to believe that Diana would be more on the goddess side. And if that's the case, that kind of opens up some more cracks in Batman vs. Superman, because she could have killed Doomsday no problem using the Kryptonite Spear. And also, throughout this fight sequence, we see that Ares is like throwing stuff at her, but she starts to like absorb and redirect the attacks. Now, I kind of think that this is the best kind of scenario for her powers to kind of develop, because she understands them, but she hasn't had the training involved to do what Ares is doing throughout this fight, of like taking metal and forming it on himself in armor, using like pretty much telekinesis to do all this kind of stuff. and using like the elements to like rain down lightning and everything. But by the time she's fighting Doomsday, she could have easily taken him out. It's just like, oh, Superman didn't have to die. But that's a kind of plot hole that's linked to another movie and doesn't really affect my enjoyment of what's going on here. Now, granted, this is another part where the CGI kind of gets a little bit hurt. But while she's fighting Ares, we see that Steve and the rest of them are going after, of course, an airplane that is going to drop the gas. And of course, Steve's like, alright, you guys get the rest of the gas, I'm going to take this out. So granted, here's another similarity of Captain America, i.e. a dude named Steve goes after a Doomsday plane and blows it up to make sure that it doesn't kill the other people in like a big city. Granted, it's not a bad thing, but it's like, you could have went more that he had to destroy artillery pieces or a train carrying the gas. Just to be a little bit different. Just a quibble, not really too much of a problem. So of course Diana sees him fly off and blow up the plane and is distraught. Pretty much powers up and takes redirected lightning and blasts Ares into oblivion. Of course this ends the war. They see the celebration and everything. And of course she's really sad and kind of traumatized, kind of like the rest of the people in World War I by what she's seen, because she's experienced the outside world, she's experienced the goodness of people and the darkness of people, and lost someone that she loved. And it's kind of cool to see her go through this, and then see her kind of in the present day, like going out again to be Wonder Woman and be that kind of positive force that Steve would have wanted her to be. So overall, I really enjoyed the movie, and think that it's a very good step in DC's direction for making movies. Hopeful, because it had a nice balance of humor and also dealing with mature things. Now, granted, I really think that the villains needed a lot more work. Ludendorff and Dr. Poison were really not really well developed. Ares was kind of your typical thing. The best thing I can say is that at least they were able to get the heroes right, and kind of the hero right, Diana, and also her supporting cast to kind of like beef her up. That is the biggest compliment I can tell that this movie was able to do. And granted, most comic books movies have trouble with dealing with villains because for some reason they just sometimes don't get the correct handle on them, or they take them off the board too effectively. Because now we've got no other gods to kind of, at least to our knowledge, to put in Diana's path, and it looked like Ares was pretty much nuked. So we'll have to see what other kind of rogues they're able to pull out for Wonder Woman and any other solo films that they do with her, and I'm really excited to see how she does in Justice League, because she was my favorite part of Batman vs. Superman, and she was amazing here, and I'm pretty sure that she's going to do an amazing job in the Justice League. And from what I've seen in the trailer, I'm gonna really like to see the interplay between all the different people, but I think she's probably the most developed at the moment from what they've done movie-wise, so I'm glad that they were able to do this film in a way that did justice to the character while also setting up a good DC movie. So, those are my opinions on the movie. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.